But welcome to the webinar, everybody. My name is Taran. I am the Senior Product Manager at Soft Solutions, and I am looking after Sophos since we took them over, or not took them over, but since we were announced as a distributor 2.5 months ago. So it's been an amazing brand to work with. I'm super excited about everything that they do. And it's really been a lot of fun working with the Sophos team and taking out their different solutions to our partners. So just a bit of background. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with Soft Solutions. We are a hardware and software distributor based in New Zealand. And we are also part of the Blue Chip family. So for those that don't know, Blue Chip is the largest Sophos distributor in ANZ. So from our perspective, we've really got a lot of resources to draw on and a huge amount of expertise to call on when it comes to Sophos and being able to share that knowledge. And for Soft Solutions itself, we have myself as the product manager, but we also have our own technical team and resources based in-house to help cover everything from their endpoint security all the way up to their firewalls. On the webinar today, we've got Cameron Reid, Sophos MSP and CSP manager, and Tony Cosma, who's just returned from Europe, who's the New Zealand-based senior sales engineer for Sophos. And I just wanted to say to you guys a big thank you for taking the time out of your day to take part in this webinar, and we very much appreciate it. But I'll stop talking now and I'll hand over to the guys and I'll let them take it away. But before I do that, just we do have a couple of promos as well, so do wait to the end of the webinar so you guys can see what those are. But take it away.
Great, thanks for that introduction, Tyron. Really appreciate that. So yeah, as Tyron said, I've got Tony Cosma here today. We're going to keep this fairly conversational as well in some of the slides and really cover these both from an MSP perspective, but also really driving, the need for MDR and how we see that used in our MSP ecosystem and how some partners have been very, very successful in their adoption to those processes. So we're really looking at why the need and why it's critical to move to MDR nowadays. We'll probably talk to this slide a little bit more, both from a technical perspective, but also from how MSPs are leveraging this. We see a lot of our MSPs obviously having a lot of alert fatigue in a lot of these areas, and some of these attacks are really leveraging good tools and really trying to slip under the radar of how they're actually attacking some customers' environments. And I'd probably sort of just get you to comment on that, Tony, as well, just maybe from some of the use stories that we see or real life stories that we see in the MDR team to this effect. So maybe you can just add a little bit of color to, how these attacks come in, how we often see, weak signals being put out by very, very good tools out there in the market, but then how the adversaries just keep on moving inside these environments to eventually become successful in some cases. So maybe if you can just add some light on this particular slide, that'd be great.
Thanks, thanks, Cameron, and everyone, thanks for attending today. Hopefully you guys can hear me nice and clear. I'm still trying to reconfigure my setup after a long holiday. But coming back to the slide and probably very closely related to another slide you're going to show, Cam, I think it's a very thin line between, someone trying to get in, which eventually will generate a lot of noise, a lot of alerts coming from so many systems that we've invested in, all these cybersecurity systems, part of a larger ecosystem. Eventually, it's a very thin line between someone actually trying very hard and generating a lot of noise, and someone eventually will get in, and then you know the rest from there. So it's probably the most challenging part is, are you able to be 100% proactive and investigate every single indicator of compromise, come up with an incident response plan, and eventually be doing that 24/7, which that's the case. We have a a schedule 8 to 5, or some others maybe go beyond that. But eventually, when we look at attackers and adversaries, they work 24/7. So we can't just really put in place security controls, and eventually when we have time to look into those alerts and respond to those. So coming back to the slide and all this, I think we had a discussion even with Cam before, looking at the way they got in the past, and phishing was and still is, phishing, it's still an important attack vector when it comes to initial access. But there are other ways to get in, and probably exploiting vulnerabilities in our system, especially the ones which are publicly facing. It's still at the highest interest when it comes to get in, or again, that initial access. But compromised credentials, which to be honest makes it even harder to detect when someone actually has a legit access into our systems, into our networks. It's very easy for them to behave as legit traffic, as the baseline, stay within the baseline, and eventually very close to launching an attack or launching a wide ransom across your whole network. It's a very short time between those two actions. So that really makes it hard for us to eventually to respond to that. And actually, I want to add actually two more points here. These are stories from the incident responders that Sophos is part of the managed detection and response team, which is a 24/7 SOC. And I think nothing tells the story better than an actual story, as opposed to all those stats and reports that we continuously read and educate ourselves. And in this case, I think it makes a lot more sense. Now, in this case, in the very first case I'm going to tell you about, it was already a managed detection and response customer. So they were 100% protected. Everything was monitored, investigated, and responded by Sophos. In this case, we reached out around 11 o'clock p.m., telling them that, hey, we see attacks against your DC, domain controller, from an unmanaged IP address. So we could control everything within that network except those assets and IPs that are not protected by Sophos. Now, in this case, they said, just send us an email and we'll investigate it. Okay, that's what we did, although we could actually respond it ourselves in that case. And after that 11 o'clock call and email we've sent, we could see the increase of those attacks. And we tried to call 17 times after that, between 11 and 3 a.m. Eventually, we had to isolate that server because they were actually managed to almost to get in. Eventually, what happened was an unpatched Mitel system that was actually facing the public internet, and that's how they got in. Sadly, in this case, they actually found an unmanaged all legacy server with a lot of data they managed to compromise and eventually encrypt. But just to see and give you a bit of a true story on what do you do when you see signs, how quickly can you react to a sign or certain indicators that you see in your whatever system you use to monitor your networks.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, Tony. I mean, this sort of talks to that, doesn't it? And we spoke about this a little bit before, but often, and whether this is a Sophos tool or whether it's other tools, these are signals for things that potentially or definitely need to be investigated, don't they?
That's the and that actually, if you look at the times, that's a very good slide. Look at the times when those potentially unwanted applications were installed or trying to install on those systems. It's 1:52 a.m. And yesterday, actually, I went to an event in Auckland, and so I was speaking to a company that provides a 24/7 SOC, theoretically. And I said, so do you have someone investigating 24/7 all the signs and eventually respond to those signs where that is required? And I said, no, sorry, we don't have anyone, we don't have people 24/7 behind the screen, but we have security controls in place and rules that eventually someone will investigate the second day. Now, from experience, that second day might be a bit too late.
Yeah, and this is one dashboard, and MSPs are dealing with maybe 6, 8 dashboards in some cases for other security tools or events. So being able to do that at scale across all of those signals is getting more and more challenging. We often talk about our MSPs and it looking like this. I mean, it really is. I mean, there's a lot of alerts. There's lots of really good tools out there nowadays, but being able to ingest those like a fire hose is very, very difficult. I think, you know, a lot of the conversations that I have with MSPs looking at that, they almost find that becomes a bit of a complacency. And I know this is a bit of a pun, but it's almost like so many alerts coming through, it becomes so challenging to know what to do next to be able to mitigate these areas, especially when you're compounding this against across all your customers and all your security tools. It's a difficult task. And we talked to this a fair bit as well as these risks that MSPs have. I mean, from an end customer perspective with their own security teams, it's hard enough. But for us in the MSP ecosystem, obviously looking after our own environment first is very, very important. And we'll talk about this a little bit as well, and what we're finding some of our MSPs doing through our NFR program, and definitely making sure that they've got very, very good security measures through their own supply chain. We talk about that a fair bit, but these are really some of the risks and challenges that we hear all the time as MSPs. I mean, one is looking after their own environment. Two is the human skill shortage. I mean, the attackers are becoming smarter and smarter in the way that they are able to attack and slip under the radar from your customers' environments. That's very, very challenging to keep staff, especially when you need to be doing that 24/7, as we were explaining before. Customer assumptions, we often talk about this in MSP as well. I mean, how many customers have said to you as an MSP, well, we thought you were doing 24/7 monitoring from the get-go. It's often a assumption from end customers that not only are you doing, you know, their policy side of things, but you're also monitoring their environments all the time. So the more and more we take end customers through the education of what's actually being done in most environments for most of our MSPs out there, it's a very, very important topic to be taking them on that journey of why the need for these services as we see the security landscape changing a lot. And as Tony said, you know, more the stories and the things that we're finding from our security operations teams are more relevant than stats and how many attacks are happening out there and areas around that. But cost management margins as well, very, very interesting. And we'll talk a little bit around, you know, how we're seeing partners successfully bundle, but also asking for more money to be doing the 24/7 monitoring and outsourcing that to have better posture in those areas. And obviously, as a supply chain, as an MSP partner, your reputation's really important as well. So, you know, again, leading to that, protecting your own internal systems first, very, very important to protect your brand in those areas. So really, the outcome of this service and is really to stop the attacks in your customer's environment. So being able to do this at scale, 24/7, but really the human hands-on keyboard approach that our MDR services offer on your behalf, very, very important to the differences and how we deliver this service. And we'll have a look at that in a little bit of detail on the different formats of how we offer this service and what we're able to do across third-party tools as well for your customers' environments. So really use cases here. I mean, one of the big differences is, as I was saying before, it is hands-on keyboard. We do use human threat analysts. We've got about 600 globally as part of the MDR team now. And also obviously being able to do that across other third-party products, really important as well. And we'll show a bit of a snapshot on what we offer today. but you'll also see all of our third-party integrations, if there's security events, being able to pull those into our data lake and be able to help you as an MSP correlate that information as well. And obviously the reduced workload. So really, a lot of the time when we hear about partners that do investigate most of these alerts, they say the amount of time on false positives is actually huge. So being able to use our skill sets, use our big machine learning algorithms to be able to work out what truly needs to be hands-on keyboard and have human threat analysts look at, very, very key to how we offer this service as well. Anything you'd want to add in there, Tony?
Well, yes, I was trying to unmute myself. One of the misconceptions I usually hear, and it's not necessarily related in my Sophos SE role, but when in general in the IT industry, you know, everyone is talking about the AI and machine learning and deep learning, and a lot of this, you know, detection and protection systems rely a lot on this advanced AI technologies, especially the generative AI that everyone is talking about. But one thing to keep in mind is, remember, when you look at, again, a very smart and motivated adversary, they are hands-on keyboard. Yes, they might leverage themselves various you know, machine learning, deep learning systems to accelerate some part of the attack. But once they get a foothold of your network, they will switch hands-on keyboard, and they will obfuscate enough until actually they will disable your protection and eventually, you know, achieve what the outcome is: ransom, exfiltration, and so on. So yes, AI and various automated systems are amazingly proficient and helps us a lot, but you can't exclusively rely on those systems, as you do need that hands-on keyboard that Cameron mentioned, part of the 24/7 SOC that in this case we provide. And I know Cam mentioned a number. Actually, we went way above that lately. And I was just speaking to one of our managed detection and response security analysts, and part of that large team, which goes above 700 people across the globe, more than 200 are actually incident responders. So those guys will basically threat hunt and basically keep you safe.
Thanks for that, Tony. And I suppose there's an outcome. This is what we're trying to provide, right? Like a peace of mind, give you a bit of a clean air to breathe, because there is so much noise out there and so many concerns when you're trying to protect your customer's environment all the time. So really from a perspective of how we differ from some of our competitors out there, I like to use this as a bit of an example of how many tools are out there. And these may or may not be Sophos tools in each of these areas, bringing in all these security alerts, but definitely trying to pull in that noise and correlate that noise and make that meaningful across all of these different tools is very, very challenging. So that's exactly what we're trying to do with not only offering MDR services with our own tools that we look at here. Across the top line, you can see that all of our Sophos tools up in the green section are all included in both our tiers, which I'll discuss in a moment, of licensing for MDR, but also all these third-party integrations that we can also have licensed to be able to pull in those alerts into our SOC team to be able to look at that in a more meaningful way, especially if you've got things like root cause analysis or incident response included in the plan for this, being able to pull in things like third-party firewall logs, probably identity side of things as well. Certainly email is very, very valuable in the context of that information and what you're able to provide in the event that you do need to go full scale and provide a report in these perspectives as well. Anything you want to add on that one, Tony? And
Just a quick note, what you see on the screen is just a table, the top of the table. When it comes to these third-party vendors, the list is a lot longer, and we can provide you with all the third-party vendors that we connect with, and that list is continuously growing as we speak. And it is a really important, because as in the past, the approach was rip and replace. In this case, is continue to use your security system. Your investments will overlay on top of that our SOC, so you can actually use what you continuously use what you normally do without having to actually reinvest in security.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I mean, those discussions around educating end customers as well, invariably they'll say, well, we've never had anything happen on our environment. But if you're able to pull all the intel into a system that can provide very granular reporting on that, it really helps that conversation as well. So definitely on those third party and not ripping and replacing, as you said before, is key to how I see a lot of our partners at least start that security conversation with their end customers. This is just a bit of an overview of where we actually have our SOC locations globally. I think this is important because of where we see those threats coming in from different areas. Obviously, we can share that information with our SOC teams very, very quickly, but the scale of where we have these security operations centers definitely helps us at scale be able to have very, very good security information to be able to act on very, very quickly. Just briefly on the licenses themselves, we've recently changed them to make it a very simple licensing model. So we have Sophos MDR Essentials and Sophos MDR Complete. Sophos MDR Essentials can run alongside of third-party endpoints as well, with a lightweight XDR agent to still be able to pull that information into our data lake. And really that's the only difference is really there is that it stops at, it can't provide the full incident response side of things. And obviously our breach warranty is another key area that's not included in our Essentials license. But we see a very good use case, and I'll talk to that in a moment, just around our Microsoft attachment as well. So obviously Sophos MDR for Microsoft Defender, that's exactly the same license as Sophos MDR Essentials. So we're seeing a big drive for a lot of new MSPs moving across to us that have said, well, look, we're probably going to stay with Defender in some of our customer environments because they perceive they've already paid for that license. They want to leverage it, but they're really struggling with the security alerts and being able to respond to those. That, I might add as well, comes with the full Sophos agent also, so that can either be used later on if they do decide to move away from Defender or whatever other third-party endpoint they're using, but it certainly can be run in combination with the lightweight XDR sensor as well. So what we do with all that information, and obviously from correlating from all third-party signals, whether it be endpoint, firewalls, NDR, which is another very, very interesting license. Sophos offer that, and that's more at the moment a virtual machine that sits inside of a network and looks at north, south, east, and west traffic. So really, really useful when you have maybe an IoT environment that you can't install endpoint agents on and still be able to look at that traffic and what that traffic's doing that in that side of things and pumping that into the data lake also. So certainly from all the Sophos tools, as I said before, they're included free to be able to pull into the data lake, and that's with both forms of license, either the Essentials or the Complete license. All the Sophos tools are included in that area into the data lake. I touched on our Microsoft play a little bit as well, and both the Essentials license or MDR Complete would actually cover the Microsoft security sources as well. And depending on whether they're using our lightweight sensor, if they're using Defender, it would depend on what sort of endpoint functionality is available through the team as well. Would you add anything on this particular slide, Tony?
Yes, as probably most of our customers are using Microsoft to some extent, and I guess that normally goes around identity first, Active Directory, but some other products in this case, why not endpoint protection and so on. So we do integrate with Microsoft in two different ways. One is Microsoft Graph Security API, which is basically everything you see on the left-hand side of the screen except Office 365 management activity, which is the second way we integrate. So except the last one is Microsoft Graph Security API, and probably you guys are familiar with what it means is like a security hub for everything that Microsoft raises as an alert. Yes, Microsoft indeed provides a score for those alerts. Actually, the rate goes from low, medium to high. We actually don't completely rely on that. We run all those through our own detection pipeline, which is a lot more complex than you can see on in the middle of the screen. And eventually, an alert coming from Microsoft, it's not just an enrichment of the data lake, or it's not just something that tells us more about what happens. It can be a starting point for a new investigation, and that's very important. And of course, second to that, Office 365 management activity log adds more details and enrichment to that, a bit more context around those alerts. So that's a very important part or way that we do integrate with Microsoft, and we overlay on top of including Microsoft Defender.
Perfect, thanks for that. And yeah, this is just a little bit about how many customers, and this grows. We can't even keep this up to date, but we've got about 17,000 MDR customers today. And I think the response time, or the mean time to respond, very, very important here. So to cover that in a little bit more detail, I mean, some of our data on internal SOC teams and their ability and how quickly they can respond in these areas. We have SLAs and response times of 38 minutes all up, compared to some of these ones ranging from, you know, just over 3 hours to 30 hours in some of those internal SOCs. So very, very important that we're able to do that, because some of those sophisticated attacks that we see really need that sort of response and turnaround for being able to mitigate those risks in those timeframes. And I like to say, you know, if something happens at 1 o'clock in the morning, as an example, it's remediated by 2 o'clock. So I mean, I think that's sort of more meaningful than the 38 minutes, but certainly they're the sort of response times that we're able to do through our SOC services team. So really, from an MSP perspective, really important things around, it doesn't really matter what size you are as an MSP, being able to outsource this really helps you be able to build a SOC straight away. So very, very easy to scale to this point and offer your customers very, very good security in the journey that you take them from. We'll talk about the licensing in a little bit of detail on how flexible that is as an MSP, but every license under the MSP dashboard is completely changeable. So you can move a customer from a very good endpoint solution right up to a 24/7 complete security with IR included in there as well, very, very easily, just from a change of license functionality through your dashboard. I think another thing we don't talk about so much is an escalation point for your technical staff. The MDR team, very, very good at being able to respond to even queries for things that you don't know and that you found in one customer's environment, that potentially you just want some reassurance that everything's okay, or you would need some investigation on your behalf in that customer's environment. that's very, very useful to have that technical team to be able to reach out to and say, hey, can you just check this out? We've seen an indication of compromise in another customer's environment. Can you check that it doesn't exist anywhere else? And they will do, you know, threat hunting and feedback back to you on that and those areas as well. Anything you'd sort of add on that, Tony?
No, I think you actually covered quite well in this case. Kim, probably one very quick note on that one. You've mentioned about scalability, and this is something I often talk about, irrespective of your customer size, from one-man band to the largest enterprise you manage. Let's go with a number here. Let's say 2,000 users customer. Irrespective of its size, they will get the same level of 24/7 SOC services. So that's very important.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to add. So just quickly on the bundling and how we see actually customers or partners putting this forward, I think it's really important, and something we talk about a lot is almost labeling your agreements with a date. I find that a lot of MSPs have had customers for so long and they've never reinvestigated or had another security conversation later on about what's actually needed to protect their environments nowadays. So we like to have partners, and many partners do, is already date their agreements so that the customers know that the expectation is that there's going to be another discussion around what's potentially needed to improve their security posture within that 2-year period. Another thing we find is a lot of MSPs will have a lump sum price for both their security offering, but also their technical support or their help desk. We would encourage partners to split that out, because invariably, when we were talking about before, is the misconception around if something happens in an environment and threat hunting is needed, if they're not licensed for MDR, you know, that's something that you take on and don't charge those customers for. Very, very important. If you're not licensed for MDR, if you are licensed for MDR, that's all taken care of for you. But if you're not, it's very, very important to make sure that they're aware of that timing, or split that out when they do have MDR, to say, well, that's the MDR component and the dollar value of having that 24/7 security. We find that works very, very well. Creating dedicated bundles, we still find a lot of our partners doing that. We're seeing a little bit less of that, only because then end customers now seem to want to have that conversation about the various elements of what's covered within those bundles. So sometimes we find, again, having bespoke line items for each of the offerings that you're covering for them can work better for those conversations as you're starting to have them with end customers. This is really important on that topic, this NIST framework cybersecurity assessment. This is not gated. That URL that you see below is where you can access this information, and it's really in 2 formats, a long version and quite a short version, but it's really, really well done to take the customer through. If you wanted to give it directly to them, I would recommend you actually sit with customers and at least do the short version and look at the NIST framework to be able to educate on all the different areas, and a lot of them not security tools, but things like you know, having a redundancy plan, having a security plan if something does go horribly wrong. Very, very important to take them through this. So definitely use this as a tool, and we'll send these slides out so that you've got all these URLs. But I find this very, very useful for partners to be having that security conversation. Another one that we find is very successful is an opt-out campaign. Even if customers don't opt into this, it's still educating them of the need for the change and the reason why you recommend those changes. And even if they opt out, I wouldn't say it shelters your responsibility completely, but it's definitely helped that you've advised them that really their posture needs to be improved in these areas, and they should have alert monitoring 24/7. And this can really help. We see this used as both an opt-in campaign, but also an opt-out campaign. The partners that have used it as an opt-out campaign are staggered how many customers actually say, yes, we're fine with it. So, some of them have said up to 60% of their customers were absolutely fine. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you use this and customize it to how you want to flavor some of the wording within it as well. From an MSP perspective, and the why it's such a successful program is obviously there's no need to purchase any licenses up front. Once you're actually licensed for our MSP dashboard, every Sophos product's actually licensed in that dashboard for you to be able to consume. Cross-sell's really, really easy. You can start, as I said, from a very basic endpoint license all the way up to 24/7 SOC solutions just by changing the license with a licensing wizard. So nothing more to install. It's literally changing from the dashboard directly, and that will actually change the entitlements for that end customer. Obviously, retention is very good. We talked about that before. A lot of MSPs have their customers for so long and don't have those sit downs and new conversations around security posture with those end customers. And the licensing within the Sophos dashboard is pure consumption licensing. So meaning anything that's switched off for greater than 30 days automatically will not bill. So once that device is turned back on and utilizing the license, that will pull back into the billings side of things. But it works very well for those environments that scale up and scale down to be able to make their costing very, very competitive in those areas. There's also no advertised recommended retail price. So we absolutely want you to bundle your services around our offerings and be a little bit creative how you actually position those. But certainly all the tools are available within the Sophos Central MSP Flex dashboard. So this is a very noisy slide, I know, but this just explains how we categorize each of our licenses. So all of our firewalls are under devices, all of our servers are under servers. They all aggregate across all your multiple customers and give you better buying price depending on how many of these licenses. Doesn't matter what flavor in each of those categories, but it will reduce your licenses in your buy price in each of these areas. The really interesting one here that you see under the U for the user licensing, anything around endpoint licensing, mobile, device encryption, obviously our email products, even our phishing awareness, all aggregate within that user license category. So that can make it very, very easy for you to scale up to be able to reduce your buy price as you move up through our licensing bands. So again, we're not looking at each of your individual customers. We look at how many licenses you're using in each of those categories across you as a partner to give you better buying prices in those areas. I use this one because all of our third-party integrations, very important to note here, are all included within the user license category as well. So if they were using, say, an endpoint license, they were licensed for MDR through endpoint, and then we're using some identity integration for perhaps Duo or something like that for monitoring that, that would obviously double up their license count per user. So that also really has helped recently increase that banding for each of our partners. So this in a little bit of detail, and we're getting to the end here, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end. But definitely, I would say, look at the NFR program, very, very competitive pricing within that. the endpoint license component is essentially free, and there's very good discounts off the monitoring for your own environments as well for MDR. So I would strongly suggest looking at that for protecting your own internal networks, because as I said, you know, the supply chain and reputation, very, very important for you as an MSP to make sure that you're well protected in those areas as well. These resources here, certainly the sign up page, important to note, but if you are interested in the program, very, very easy to sign up through the /MSP URL there. Definitely leverage that.
But we'll move over to questions. If anybody has questions, just feel free to pop them in the question section on the GoToWebinar dashboard. So we'll sit here, just wait to see if any questions come through, and I'll read those out to Cam and Tony, and we can take it from there.
Perfect.
We've got a few unfortunate spam comments coming through. Just ignore those. So just one question that's come through, Tony, Cam. So somebody said they're a Microsoft partner already. How would MDR look over Defender?
Yeah, so I can answer that, and then Tony might want to add some more to it. But if they were a Microsoft partner using Defender, they'd use the lightweight sensor as part of MDR Essentials, and that would certainly give them all the Microsoft alerts and also link our agent to that endpoint so that we can you know, mitigate anything that we see on that endpoint environment as well, and pull in all those alerts from Defender into our SOC as well. So there is no need to rip and replace that. Definitely keeps it very flexible in being able to provide that service and leave Defender in play if that's what they choose to do. Would you add anything more on that, Tony?
No, that was spot on, Cam. But just to add a bit, maybe a technical layer of what you said is basically with an existing endpoint from Microsoft installed on those computers and servers, we do get everything we need to know from Microsoft as detections, alerts through that Microsoft Graph API integration. Additionally to that, we deploy the XDR lightweight sensor, which allows us to actually collect additional telemetry, but also respond. A very important part of that 24/7 SOC is, yes, detection and investigation is very important, but remember, we can respond on your behalf. And when I say on your behalf, can be you as a partner and eventually your customer as well. So that's part of what we would do with Microsoft Defender. Of course, the story goes a bit deeper, as Microsoft is quite a large ecosystem, but as a very high level, we can basically respond on your customer's behalf.
Awesome, thank you guys. I think I've got another question here, double check. Is the incident response retainer available on both Sophos and non-Sophos customers? And what is the difference between that and rapid response?
Yeah, no, so that's a good question. So retainers available for anyone. They wouldn't need to be using a Sophos license at all. It's basically the retainer is basically giving them a fast track into what we call rapid response. So rapid response, we never really want many of our customers to have to use, but if they are under imminent threat, we have a service called rapid response. Retainer actually gives them a head start into that so that we have the team to respond straight away rather than them being in the queue. And it also gives them a credit for that retainer fee into the rapid response quote. So depending on how severe that customer's environment was looking when the rapid response team quote that up, the retainer would have a multiplier on it to be able to discount or give them a credit into the rapid response side of things. So Tony, I might let you have more on the technical side there, but definitely from the licensing thing, it's applicable to any non-Sophos customer as well.
Yes, you covered quite well, Cam. There's not much to be added, but I think in a nutshell, the retainer, besides establishing that relationship with you as a potential customer, hopefully not, because the retainer would be eventually used as responding to a threat. So kind of implies that you are, if not compromised, someone is trying really hard to get in, but also gives you a level of credit that can be used against that service, which eventually will imply a cost. And the second part of the question, yes, that is available to Sophos and non-Sophos customers. So you can be basically not using anything with Sophos and still get the retainer. The only customers that can't get retainers basically are the Sophos MDR complete, which includes everything they need to have, including a 24/7 incident response team. So hopefully that really answers the question. We do have additional security services depending on the let's call it a cyber breach life cycle. If you think you maybe could have been compromised, you see some signs, you're not 100% sure, we do have a security assessment which can be used to investigate and basically give you a report with the conclusion if yes, you are compromised or not. And from there you can move to, of course, depending on the relationship and contract you might have with Sophos and to your partner, of course, to lead you to a incident response team or rapid response, or potentially to an MDR service.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome, thanks guys. So another question, under the Flex program, are integrations with Are integrations available under the Flex program with MDR licenses? And with the licensing, are they counted as a user or server product?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, they're counted under the user license. So yeah, definitely compound that user license band to quickly help you scale as a partner. So I think I used the example of if they were using a MDR endpoint license, but then also wanted to tap into Duo alerts, they'd use the identity pack, and that would count as 2 licenses for that one user because they've got the identity pack licensed under user category as well.
Awesome. I think we'll, Cam, Tony, I think we'll wrap that up there. So to everybody on the webinar, thank you very much. We will, like Cam said, we will be making the slides available to you as soon as we can. And we will put a recording up of the webinar if you do want to come back to review what we discussed. Do visit all those links that Cam mentioned. There's a lot of useful resources in there, and you can always get in touch with us at Soft Solutions, at Sophos, at softsol.co.nz, and we're more than happy to help you out. But Cam, Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time. And like I said, it's really good to hear from your perspective and your insights and what you guys are hearing out in the market, and actually sharing that knowledge with everybody on the webinar.
Excellent. Appreciate everyone joining. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all. Stay vigilant.